listening to AM Ocala Live, WOCA, The Source, 96.3 FM, 1370 AM. So we're broadcasting to you live from the Paddock Mall, streaming live, YouTube Live, WOCA, The Source Radio. As we are now 9 minutes past the top of the 9 o'clock hour in the studio, I have Mr. Sheriff Billy Woods. Good morning, sir. How you doing?
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. And you know, as much as the rain, as I was talking about earlier in the show that we got this weekend, it's actually been a beautiful morning. It's already starting to get a little bit warm out there as we're now above 75 degrees, and we're expecting a heat index of over 100 today. Still with a 60% chance of some showers and thunderstorms. But nonetheless, as far as the weather goes, though, with a lot of rain, we were just talking off air there, that kind of left things. And when he said that, I was like, "That's okay." You know, he said a little bit boring with the rain, but that's okay because there's been so much that's gone on in everything in the world within the last few months within this year. And as we move to that, it was pretty much. I just mentioned a little bit about kind of like where the number is for crime, as we've talked a little bit about that. But before we do all that, before we get into that stuff, I wanted to just start out with saying, hey, on Friday we moved into a full phase 2.
Right.
And as much as we've dealt with everything COVID-19 and coronavirus pandemic, here we are. Now we're in summer basically, and it's June, and here we go. Now we're coming back to it. And my girl and I, we got out this weekend and had some dinner on Friday night.
That's awesome.
And it was actually interesting because I kind of just didn't. As much as I'm doing this, I needed a distraction to get out there and relax a little bit, but I had kind of plumb forgot that everything was opening back up, and it was pretty busy downtown for the first night of everything coming back open.
Yeah, it has. As these phases are kicking in, I'm pretty sure your travels on 200, you're beginning to see the traffic. We talked about that last month. It's even gotten even more.
Yeah.
The phases have bringing people back out, the businesses opening, restaurants, and I think you've already mentioned just before me getting on air about the bars and the bowling alleys opening, which is a good thing. Everybody can get to a sense of norm. And really, across the board, you're beginning to see everything begin to plateau back to where, if you can call it the normal.
Right.
But activity has increased.
Yeah.
It definitely has. For me, probably for you, like you last night, it's been nice to be able to go sit down in a restaurant to enjoy a meal.
Yes.
Actually have conversations outside of yourself.
Yes. Yes.
to say hello to people when you're walking around. But
it is funny though. I do got to mention, as you brought that up, there is such an interesting play to how we are dealing with this post, like you said, some normal, our new normal. Everybody's giving it some funny term, but it is interesting. So the establishment that we ate at, now remember that the bar area is now open for you to be able to sit and have dinner also. But it's always interesting. So some of the guidelines that are set, how people react to what they can and can't do, and then everybody means well, and I think what they did at the place we were at was they staggered 2 seats next to each other, and then they would go about 6 feet, so they had a lot of missing bar stools, if you will, and so many people were just not sure what to do.
Just guide me. Give me the right direction.
It's always like we were there for maybe an hour and a half, and within that time you've seen so many people go. They do the thing where they look around and they go, are we allowed to sit here? Like what repercussions would come if they decided to and then ask anybody? But it is kind of interesting how that plays into it. And with that same idea, it's just, what that means for this new normal, as we said, things now downtown. What does that mean for you guys as sheriffs now that things are opening back up like this? Does that change anything as now your approach to the new normal? Or do you just kind of say, hey, we know that we got to do what we got to do, and this is part of it. It's the same old. Now that things are opening back up, we can get back to what we've already been doing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you and I discussed it a couple months ago, or the first time on the radio, talking about us as it gets back to the norm.
Yeah.
For us, it's more of all right. Let's get back to work, instead of having to do something differently to whatever it may be.
Sure.
just bringing us back on track. And it's something, just like you in life, there's something you do routinely that becomes very familiar.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. With everything coming back open, we know what to expect, you know, especially like retail stores. We know that thefts will increase, come back. Because those retail stores weren't open, or the amount of people allowed into the retail stores was very minimum. Restaurants, bars, of course, bars, everybody goes there to drink, and usually something else happens, and we're called to it. So that for us is the routine, it's the job, it's what we expect.
Sure.
Just mentally and mindset when shifting in handling the calls that come in is really what it boils down to.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, shifting the mindset, if you will. It's is that something you guys, tell the guys? And also, too, I was going to mention is, with as much as we were discussing earlier before we had you on about how with everything still being lockdown, that changed the direction of crime, if you will, or certain things that were going on with more like domestic abuse, child abuse, stuff that was happening more in the home because that's where people were at.
Right.
And, do you guys have like a level of projection or expectation in numbers to say that when certain things shift like that, then there's a change in resources directed at certain areas? You know what I'm trying to say?
We don't really have a prediction. There are models out there that,
and I only say that because of how much we know that, like with the Department of Health, they've got numbers that they're trying to see into the future, if you will. And you guys do something like it.
That's a good, that's difficult for us. We try to predict based off of our experiences. We know, good example is what I just mentioned to you.
Yeah.
All right, let's give like Walmart, Target, and all your major retail stores like that, who go from having literally thousands of people come in to a day where you only have hundreds. Now that we know these phases are coming open, we can pretty safely predict, by looking in the past of what we've had in crimes, in particular retail stores, of saying, all right, this is going to increase. What it's going to be, we don't know, because the one factor for us that you cannot calculate for is the human being itself.
Right.
All right, and the human being's mindset of, I'm going to commit a crime today, don't know. You and I discussed domestic violence.
Right.
When you deal with any type of person's crime like that is almost impossible to predict, because it is you, the individual, that makes that decision to commit the crime or to batter an individual.
Sure.
So outside of bars, we can have a pretty good prediction. You get drunk, there's going to be a fight usually. So, but however, it is difficult for us to make predictions. Now, what we do in law enforcement is we have what's called intelligence-based policing. We know that certain individuals, and I'll give you an example. If an individual gets taken out of prison who has been known to commit a series of burglaries in a particular area have a rise. Well, we look at the individuals. Where are they at? Where they've been?
Sure.
And we can correlate the two. Doesn't mean that they did, but just gives us help in a direction. Okay, we can rule this person out because they were in prison, or this person no longer lives in this area.
Sure.
Those are the things that we take out that kind of help us predict.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting nonetheless. Yeah, to give you guys some kind of edge, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
As moving through a little bit, the good thing is now that we see the changing tide and returning to things to opening, that does take away. And we were talking a little bit about this off air. It's just that there is a little bit of a curve with the domestic violence and child abuse and stuff like that starting to change a little bit for the better, because, like we said, it's not to the capacity of everything that was with dealing with at home, with unemployment, no job, looking for things to do, and a world pandemic to go through. Right.
All of that stress gets put on when you confine individuals into close spaces that already have conflict. Obviously, because if there was domestic violence there before, it's going to increase if you keep them tightly in a location. And, we would like to see the plateau just drop off and crime not occur, period. Okay?
Sure.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not what happens in this world that we live in. But for domestic violence and certain things, there is a plateau. There's still crime. That type of crime is still occurring. Mm-hmm. But but because of the phases. This is the benefits or the good,
right?
If you can call it that, is
right.
that it does take that down, takes that crime coming down, where
right.
people getting away, taking themselves out of the situation.
Yeah,
is helping.
Yeah, absolutely. And even just going back to work does big things for that. And on the side of it, I know we could say that getting out there and partying a little bit leads to some extracurriculars, but at the same time, I think a lot of people look at what they're able to do this weekend and getting back out there and being able to socialize and have these conversations out loud with people and start to relieve some of their mindset. Because when you think about how simple it is to just have a drink with somebody and have a good conversation, is something that we've been without for a while. So now even bringing that back to the table is something that can actually maybe de-escalate their mindset.
All of what you just said, all of that is the pressure relief valve.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
Yeah.
It allows you to talk to a friend, to even talk to a person when you're sitting at the bar up there, just to let stuff out and go.
Yeah.
It's that pressure relief valve, so you don't harbor it and it doesn't fester inside of you and create even more discontent, anger, whatever it may be, depression.
Right.
It relieves it and makes it helps us.
Yeah. Yeah,
it really does.
It sure does. And with that, I'm gonna segue into a little bit here as we're coming towards the bottom here with a few more minutes to discuss. Now we talked a little off air that it was boring this weekend and it was rainy. That was a good thing. But the weekend before was a little bit more eventful, and that's obviously everything to do with what had gone on within our community for the ability to protest, considering what had gone on in Minneapolis with George Floyd and all of that. And you and Police Chief Graham were out there in downtown Ocala last weekend, and tell us a little bit about what transpired last weekend for your perspective a little bit, and overall before we get into it, it was, I think, pretty much across the board. I think everybody was pretty proud of how our community was not able to get their voice heard, but the way in which we did it. We were talking a little bit that there's a few bad apples strung out through, but nonetheless, everything it went fairly well. And there's so many people that could attest the idea of how our leadership in our community is a big part of that. And I wanted to see how you guys saw it from your perspective.
Well, you've kind of hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
The way, pardon me, myself and Chief Graham see it is we have a great community.
Yeah.
We really do here, Marion County, each of the cities. A great community, a great relationship between law enforcement and the citizens of each of our respective areas. And yes, we have those that are set out to the side. Yeah, they're the ones that are, you can call them the troublemakers, whatever you want to call them.
Instigators.
Right? Instigators, that's right.
Yeah.
But we do have that working relationship, with our community, to be able to discuss issues, to let them know exactly how we deal with things.
Sure.
And difficulty. That last weekend was great, and it was proof of that. Myself and Chief Graham were willing to get amongst them because it's their right.
Absolutely.
We were there to protect them.
Yeah.
To be able to do, because of the First Amendment. Okay. Mm-hmm. And to protect that right of those individuals, regardless of what they are saying, and in this case for good reasons, but whatever the reason, we're there to protect them. And it's not the ones that usually in the group. I will tell you this, a lot of our concerns are not like here, and probably the majority of where you're having a lot of your riots are really the community. It's outsiders that are coming in wanting to do it. And what we had found is we have individuals that come in. Over half of the people that probably attended in regards when you're aggressive are not even from your county, not even from your city. They come just to cause chaos. They come just because they have the opportunity to do some damage. The people that want to protest the right way, okay, and be peaceful, they're the ones we're trying to protect.
Absolutely.
And granted, we protect the other ones, don't get me wrong, but that's who we're trying to protect them from, the ones that want to do violence, because it doesn't serve any purpose in the direction in which the violent ones want to do it in these cases. But the weekend went well, last weekend I should say. In those protests, they got their voices out. They got to put their message out there clearly. And luckily, we only had one arrest.
Yeah.
And here, it's ironic. The protesters actually were, hey, he needs to be arrested. We know that. We're on it.
Yeah.
Because he was the instigator. He was the troublemaker, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
That needed to be taken away.
But that's a beautiful part of it, is knowing that, everybody's pointing that out. It's like, hey, we're here for a just cause. And then if anything, they're pointing out somebody for you to be like, hey, they're the one trying to ruffle feathers. That's not what we're here about. And that comes back to the communication between you and the community about, when something like this is brought up. It's communication that's able to be handled through and through that makes it an important thing. And I wanted to say that, like I said, the majority of everybody we talked to and how the weekend was expected to go, because like leading up to it, there's always that little anticipation of like, what's going to become of this?
Right.
And then I think through the midst of it, and then come towards, I think it was Monday's show, that it was, it was just refreshing to think that, everybody got behind, like we said, got their voice heard, but it was a way that, it was almost like an example that you wish could be shown through and through the country as the way it maybe should have been done, right? But nonetheless, it was really good, and we got you guys to thank for that, so very much so.
You're more than welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as we pretty much come with just a few minutes here, I just want to say, is there anything new you want to touch on with a new month here, June? We're kind of entering summer now. Is there anything that you guys wanted to put out there to the listeners?
Everybody's looking at 2020 as the most unusual year, so yeah. I really hate to bring this up, but it's something that needs to be brought up. The next big thing that's coming is hurricane season.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we are coming into the hurricane season. You've seen the storm that's been sitting out there in the Gulf that's heading north.
It kind of swept a little bit of stuff our way. It brought just a little bit of an expectation of rain, but some areas brought forth with it even some tornadoes. We know in Orange County there was some near Lake Weir. I think it was reported that there was something strong like that or close to it.
The storms we had over the weekend, they're part of that as well too. But just a reminder to everybody out there, you need to be prepared. Don't wait till the last minute. Please don't. Because we'll have the incidents of the gas being gone. Everybody's trying to get gas at the last minute.
Right.
Ensuring that you have your generators ready. Start your generators.
Yeah.
I know since like me, hey, I'm guilty of this. Haven't started that generator since the last hurricane. Okay?
Yeah.
So when you go to start it, it doesn't fire up. You're going to be hurting. So go check those. Get all that stuff prepped and ready as we prepare for the season that's coming, because the truth is we Floridians are used to the hurricanes, even though they're not fun.
Right.
But we are ready for and prepared. And I think that's what's kudos looking back at the COVID-19 and dealing with that pandemic. We in Florida are used to this massive incident and dealing with it, and how approaches had to be taken in a different direction, but we as Floridians are used to it, especially when the hurricanes come. Everything's knocked out. We all have to stay in when the hurricane. Similarities there. But prepare yourself. That would be what I would say.
And that's good to be said, is prepare yourself, because I think also, too, anything that can kind of come our way, I think a lot of people are going to grit and grind and be like, okay, we were shut down for all spring. We can handle what's prepared to lead up to, and the information we'll get in the few days we may have to be shut down, so to speak. But nonetheless, they do say it's going to be an active hurricane season, as we've already had one with Cristobal that reached the Gulf of Mexico, and like we said, brought us a little bit. So we can expect it to be continuously active. So with that is just to be prepared. We know one thing, though. We know most people are stocked up on toilet paper.
That's true. They have nothing to worry about.
It's just it's the paper, the toilet paper is taken care of, but it's the other things, like you said, starting to generate. Unfortunately, the other thing is it kind of got a little convoluted there, but we did have, and it's unfortunately over, but the hurricane preparedness tax exempt season sale, or whatever you want to call it. And I expanded on some words, but that only lasted until June 4th. That was last Thursday, unfortunately, and It's a good time, but I just don't feel like I mentioned it enough. And then by the time when I caught it, I was like, oh, I'm going to bring this up. Oh, today's the last day for it. But there was an opportunity for those that did get out there ahead of the curve, if you will, and was able to take advantage of getting certain supplies that were tax exempt. Mm-hmm. They did have that here in Florida. So kudos to those people who were able to do that. For those who didn't, as Sheriff Billy Wood says, still pay attention and get things together in order so that way you are prepared and that you don't wait to the last minute. But Sheriff, it was a pleasure to have you in here today. Absolutely.
Always a pleasure.
And like we said, to you and the Chief Graham, just thank you guys very much for the way everything's kind of went with the turmoil or everything else, the controversy that's gone on in our nation. It's nice to know that within our community, like we said, we're able to get our voices heard and do it the right way.
Glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
As we got more show for you coming up, 96.3 FM, 1370 AM. Back after this.
I'm Karen McHugh. House Democrats today getting on board the police reform bandwagon by proposing some legislation of their own.
They're calling this the Justice and Policing Act. In broad strokes, it would make it easier to prosecute police officers by changing the standard of misconduct.